Hello, Juan. Thanks for coming on The Real Real.
Of course, thank you for having me.
So, we know each other through the Forbes group, the Forbes 30 Under 30 group for Miami. But on that list, it's like grip shipping is what it talks about. And I had no idea that you were also one of the early founding members of ButcherBox too. So I thought that was super cool. And then when I looked up your history, you also had done like a bunch of other entrepreneurial ventures. So I knew that I had to have you on the podcast. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, of course. No, it's good to be here, and I like what you do in the podcast, mostly from the getting into what's the actual work that it takes to build a company, and not just the success part.
Yeah, exactly.
So I like the theme about the podcast.
Thank you. So I actually always, whenever I have an entrepreneur on or someone that's starting a company, I love to ask about your childhood because I think it's interesting, at least for me, when I was growing up, I see more of what I'm doing now. Like I see how it led me to what I'm doing now from back when I was like a little kid versus even when I was in school. Like in school, I was an engineering major, but I don't really do anything with that now as much. But when I was little, I always started these like little businesses or was in front of a camera a lot. I loved to make like home videos, and it kind of is very similar to what I'm doing as a job now. So what was your childhood like? Were you someone that you could tell that you were going to be an entrepreneur from a kid or no?
That's almost always the case.
Yeah.
What you just said. So, I've been working on something or selling something since like I can remember.
Yeah.
So when one of the funniest one that I can remember is, so my mom is from a small town in Colombia, and then I grew up in, I'd say, mid-sized town in Colombia, Barranquilla. But when I used to go to my mom's hometown, I used to buy a bunch of candy because the prices are lower in the small town. And I used to bring a full bag of candies with me to my town, and I'd be like the candy guy in school. And
The
I would
candy dealer.
Yeah, and I would like arbitrage the prices from a small town to the mid town because, like it's almost like, New York City prices versus, like rural America prices, right? It's
Right.
like prices, it's different pricing, like for the same McDonald's hamburger. So I would like arbitrage, and I would basically like retail sell by the unit, but then I would also wholesale by the bag. And I would like make so much money doing this where my family would basically ask me like, hey, where are you like making all this money on? Like, what are you doing with this thing?
They're like concerned of what you're doing.
Yeah. So I started, like as young as I can remember. And a lot of it also, comes from my dad, like seeing him work a lot. He's also an entrepreneur, business owner. He runs a 100-year-old family business.
Wow.
So he's the fifth generation running the business. So a lot of that came from that. Another one that I remember is I would always go to work with my dad on like any free day that I would have, and I would do like anything. Anything from like cashier work, just standing outside a store and like being the person who grabs the bags, the items, put them inside the bag, and just get paid tips at the end of the line, or they part of the business is a liquor distribution business, and in Colombia everything needs to be like stamped with like a government approval. So I would climb the mountains of bottles, and I would sit there with a massive pack of stickers, and I would just like pack every single bottle.
How old were you?
Maybe like 7-8 years. Like,
Okay, so
super
little.
young.
Yeah.
But I would like go into the warehouse like the entire day, and I would just go out with my clothes dirty and sweaty for the full day, and I would get paid like $5 or $10, like, whatever it is. But I
Yeah.
remember at the end of the day, my dad would sign a check that I would then have to go to the cash register and like cash in. But that's like as early as I can remember. Then I did like a bracelets business in school, where we were like making bracelets out of all these different fun materials, like what you just said, right?
Yeah.
Like as much as I can remember, I've been either trying to sell something, trying to build a business, trying to work, trying to add value somewhere. And I feel like a lot of the people that I talk to that are entrepreneurs usually come from a similar background.
Yeah, that's very similar to when I grew up also. Like I was doing like the video stuff, but I always tried to like sell anything or start like a service business when I had no experience doing that. But I always had a mindset when I was little, and I think it's probably our parents, like I'm sure your parents were the same way, where like nothing was ever not possible. Like it was always like, okay, yeah, try, like go ahead, do it. Like were they supportive of you doing these little like ventures even when you were younger?
Yeah, for sure. I think so. Yes, but I think I've always also been taught the mindset of, hey, if you're gonna do something, like do it big. Like how can this actually become a real business? And I learned that more growing up. I'm pretty sure that, when I was super young, my dad would just be like, you sell whatever you want to sell. But growing up, it's always been the mindset of, hey, yes, you want to start this, but, how can that be $1 billion idea? How can that be $100 million idea? And just, thinking through the possibilities of what can that actually become.
Yeah. And did you have pressure though to go into the family business? Because 5 generations is a lot. Do you have sisters or brothers?
I have 2 siblings. They're both older than me. One of them is someone involved in the family business. He runs like a department of the business, like a solar distribution, like solar equipment distribution company, which is basically a branch of the business. But then my other brother runs a fintech company that he started a couple years ago. So both of them great entrepreneurs, but none of them like actually, directly involved in the family business. And I don't know. I think my dad wants us to just, go out, learn, bring him stuff as well that he can get involved in as well.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily know that he wants us to just go back, live in where we grew up and work straight in the business. But we stay very close together for sure.
And when did you move to the United States from Colombia?
10 years ago in September.
Okay. So, was it for college or?
For college. So I went to Boston, to Bentley University. My first day in Boston ever was my first day of school.
Wow. So you never saw the campus. You
No.
had no. And Boston from Colombia, I mean, culture shock in every way, but also like the weather is a big culture shock.
So funny story, semi-ignorant. I did not know it snowed in Boston until I got there.
You had no idea what Boston was like?
I mean, I heard what Boston was like. I knew that I was a big baseball player growing up, so I knew, Red Sox from Boston, and I knew something about the city, but I had no idea it got that cold. I like it now, though. I do a lot of snowboarding, so I learned to appreciate the cold because it means that snow is coming. I can go snowboarding, and I like the mental peace of being sliding down a mountain.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, so different.
Yeah, no, it was so different. So what was your experience like when you got to school? Like, were you trying to immerse yourself in the American college life, like parties and going out, or were you more focused on, I'm here because I want to learn and I want to get, start my business and grow from there, or both?
All of the above.
Yeah.
I had fun in school. School was amazing for me. I met a lot of people. I definitely had some decent amount of partying, but I learned a lot, and I think I learned a lot not necessarily from the academics of the school. There's some learning there, but I think most of the learning is getting away from the house, learning to how to run your own budget, how to run your own house, how to meet people, how to understand how to add value to people so that you can then get value added at some point from that person. In return, and not that you're expecting it, but building a relationship that is going to, at some point, down the line, be something important for you. So I made a lot of good friends from college. Most of those friendships I still hold very strong, and a lot of great people doing great things. So school for me was it was amazing. I would try to go snowboarding every weekend when I could, and I also worked very hard, in school sometimes, but I also started a couple other businesses while in school. One of them we were chatting about, which was we were trying to create the Amazon of South America.
Which is a very big effort. The Amazon of anything is going to be big.
Totally. So, there's no Amazon. Still to this date, there's no actual Amazon in South America.
Really?
Yeah, you can get some stuff. But one, it takes a lot of time because it's shipped from the US. or it's very specific stuff that they warehouse down there. So it's not like the same experience. You can't just
it's
go
not
to Amazon
Prime and it comes.
Oh no.
Like I ordered something this morning and it's already at my apartment.
Yeah, totally.
From this morning.
No. This is it's so different back there. But I've always been like, working and studying, and then at the same time trying to enjoy myself, because a lot of the relationships you do out of both, out of working, out of studying, and just meeting people and having meaningful experiences with people.
Yeah. So tell me about the first one then. Tell me about the Amazon, or was that the first one? Did you have a business before that?
Probably not officially. I think this was like the first time that we said, okay, let's start a formal company and try to make this thing big and work.
Because that's for not only for your first company, but just anything, building an Amazon in South America, like that's huge. So how did you come up with the idea, and how did it end up going, and where did you start?
So I grew up after baseball. As I said, I moved into soccer, as almost every single kid in South America. And then I got a lot, very into it. I started playing almost every single day. And I wanted to buy a new pair of cleats. And I could find like two of them. One of them was not my size. The other one was not the color I wanted. So I was like, why can't I just go online and like buy something that just shows up at my door? So, classic question that an entrepreneur is asking themselves. And I was like, hey, something needs to exist down here, like in the US, where you can just go online, see every single size of yours, filter by the size, the quality, the brand that you want, and just like get it delivered to your door.
Yeah.
So we started the company. The way that we approached it at first was, hey, let's find big retail suppliers across the country that we can do basically API connections into their inventory systems, so that we can get real-time updates of pricing on inventory and just sell it. Basically be a marketplace for that, but a controlled marketplace by us. In South America, distributors and suppliers usually sell a lot of different stuff, because you can't be big just like selling pillows.
Yeah.
You have to sell a little bit of everything so you can create a big company. So we found these different suppliers. We integrated into their APIs, into their inventory systems. And, we created a marketplace. We started selling stuff in the country, everything from washing machines to TVs to toys for kids.
Like Amazon.
Yeah, like Amazon, literally. We had like 30,000 SKUs, super early on in this. And then we started running the company.
How did you figure out? Because you make it sound very easy. Like, we found these retailers, and then we just started selling. But like, how did you figure out logistics? Were you doing the shipping, or was it still the retailers that were doing the shipping? Was like
a combination. It was not easy. Business is not easy on any form. There's a lot of work and sacrifice that goes into it, for sure. But just trying things. I try to approach creating companies and services with rapid iterations of whatever you're creating, and working close with the customer. Okay. So we implement this at the new company, a group as well, where we do fast innovation cycles, which means that we go from idea to product to feedback very fast, with the customer in the middle of that equation, or of that triangle. So that means you have an idea for a product, then you talk to the customer about it, then you move into the actual product, you create the lowest effort MVP product for that, then you go back to the customer for feedback, and then with that you go back to the idea and then create another product with it. So I learned that very, very early on in my career with this company, where, like, as an example, there was basically no payment processing system down in Colombia at that time. PayPal had just left the country because there was no business for them down there.
What year was this?
2013 maybe.
Okay.
Or 2012.
Okay.
Yeah, like 10 plus years ago.
Okay.
10 years ago. But bancarization in South America and in Colombia at that time was like 2%. Basically non-existent. Only for certain people. And even within that, credit cards were even more rare. So we, for example, rapidly understood that we had to build a system to collect cash on delivery. So we were delivering TVs, collecting cash, sending it back to financial institutions, and we created this whole logistics, loop for that. And that's where I started learning a lot about logistics, because I was, forcing myself to, hey, this needs to work one way or the other.
Yeah. So were you in Boston doing this, or were you in South America?
I was mostly living in Boston, but just going between both places.
Okay.
And then one of my brothers, Gabriel, who's like a year older than me, he's a great engineer. And he was basically the one leading all the platform development and all these inventory API connection that we were having into our suppliers. So he was the guy who was like in Colombia at the time because he went to school in Bogota in Colombia. So he was like basically the presence there in Colombia for this.
And did you have experience in this before you started this business, or how did you learn so quickly? Like, because I think a lot of people think, and I think it's a difference between like entrepreneurs and people that aren't, but even for a lot of people that want to start their own business, they think, oh, well, I don't have experience in that, or how do you even do that? How do you take the first step? So how did you start learning about this? Was it just Google and you were then calling people and talking to them, or what was your process like?
What you just said, like the hardest thing is to get started. Like that's just so hard to make that decision and say, hey, I'm going to get started with this.
Yeah.
So that's like, the first hardest thing. The second hardest thing is continuing.
Yeah, I think starting can be really exciting. Like for me, I love starting because there's so many unknowns. You're like have so many ideas, and you put it together in like a document, and then you start talking to people, and everyone's excited. And then once you're in it and you're doing it, I think that for me is the hardest part. Like right after the start, continuing and like not plateauing.
Yeah,
and
I mean, how exciting is creating your first logo?
Like the branding, so cool. And the website.
But that's like 0.0001% of what you're going to have to do. I read this stat the other day and this is relevant for you, saying that the average number of episodes that a podcast puts out is 3 in the lifetime.
That's insane.
That means people start and don't continue. So persistence and starting is like, so important. So after you take that very hard step, which is like starting, then after that, second hardest is, okay, how do I continue to do this and just, don't give up with it. And I think that gives you a lot of like the learning experience to say, okay, I tried going left and left is not the way to go because I'm losing money, or my customer is not buying my product, or my customer is buying my product, but he's saying that if I do X and Y, they will buy 2X more. Then, okay, I go right. That's like,
right.
But you have to do that very fast, because if you just get caught in that decision like paralysis, then I think that's like the worst that you can do for innovation and putting a company together. I often say in with the people that I work with that a bad decision, it's much better than no decision at all.
Yeah, that's so true.
Because when you make a bad decision, then you at least know that that's not the correct way, and then you know what the correct way is. But if you just don't get started and don't push and don't make any decision at all, you're just never gonna know what the right path for that specific decision is. So that's basically the mindset of like how to learn fast when doing these things.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I think you just have to start and you have to keep going. That's it. Like the people that make really successful businesses have a lot of failures behind them, and they also have just persistence. Just they've put in the hours and the days and the years that it takes to build something, and they just don't give up. Because I think so many people view it as glamorous, or they're like, oh, I want to start a business. That's so cool. I have this good idea. And then once it gets difficult or they do stuff that they don't really like, then it's kind of like, okay, never mind, shut it down.
Yeah. So see, what you're saying is what I think it's one of the most like dangerous mindsets that has started to ramp up over the last few years, with the access to only the bright side of success stories that people see. So
totally.
social media, for example, you see very successful people in social media, and not that they're not successful, like there's a lot of people like actually talking about their real successes out there, but mostly you only see the success and they only talk about the success, and the only people talking are the ones that are successful, or at least pretending to be successful. So one or the other. But like I can guarantee that 99% of these are like 20-year overnight successes.
Yeah.
People that have been grinding for the last 20 years and sacrificing and working so hard for the last 20 years. And I think, for example, platforms like Netflix actually have done a very good job at trying to turn this around, because they're coming out with shows like, for example, I watched these 3. I like biographies or autobiography stuff. So I watched the David Beckham, the Arnold Schwarzenegger, and the Robbie Williams shows.
Okay.
And every single one of them basically shows them grinding, for the last like 30 plus years.
Yep.
Like sacrificing their childhoods. David Beckham basically in Manchester United since he was like, 14 years old, and like, not having any friends and just like basically playing soccer for forever. Arnold basically lifting weights since he's like, so young, and moving to the US at a very young age and sacrificing being home with his family. And then Robbie Williams joining this very early stage band when he was like 15 years old, and then getting kicked out and like going through depression. Like these are all things that people don't see because, social media, you see, oh yeah, they have a nice car, a nice house and like whatever, and they're having fun. But, it's like 20, 30 years of like hard work to actually get to that side of the equation.
Yeah, no, I always say that overnight success does not exist. Like just because you just heard of that person or you just, now they're popular, they probably were working at whatever it is they're doing for years before they became an overnight success. And that's with like anything, business, entertainment, influencers, like anything. Like you're doing stuff for so long before anyone ever sees what you're working on.
Yep.
And then, oh, amazing, you're like overnight. It's like, no, this has taken so long. So you started your Amazon of South America business. Did you end up what happened with it? And how did that transition to your next thing?
So we closed it. I think that, we were probably like 3 to 4 years too early to try to start that in South America, which, we could have pushed through, honestly, but we just, multiple reasons decided to close it. And then when in Boston, I wanted to get back in the path of creating something like what we have tried before. But my thought process was, hey, let me find a leader in the space local to Boston that I can work close with, learn from, understand what systems they use in the US for this, and bring them back to South America. So that was my original plan. So I Googled Boston best e-commerce startups, and I found a company called Custom Made, which used to be a like woodworkers marketplace. So kind of similar marketplace to what we have put together before, not woodworkers, but like the same type of marketplace mentality. So I found the CEO's email address. I Googled the guy. I sent him an email, cold email. I said, hey, I like what you're doing because X and Y reasons. I want to learn from you. Let's go for a coffee. And he said, hey, as of 2 weeks ago or whatever time, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm just starting this being ButcherBox. He said, if you interested about it, let's go for a coffee. So, I mean, at first I was like, shipping frozen meat in the mail, like, I'm trying to ship t-shirts, washing machines, and TVs. Like, what is this thing about shipping frozen meat in the mail? Like, how is this even possible? So, either way, the next day we went for a coffee in Harvard Square. And then the day after that, I joined the team as like one of the very, very early people in the team. I think it was like, 3 to 5 or 4 or something, where it was like, us in a closet, basically in the same desk, just, trying to put this company together and sell boxes of meat in the mail. So that's how I transitioned from the Amazon South America company into ButcherBox.
How long was the in between from going one to the other?
I think they actually overlapped.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was like, I didn't want to stop.
Yeah.
They might have overlapped for a couple months until we like officially shut it down.
Yep.
But I already knew that, hey, we're gonna shut it down. Like, I don't want to stop. I just want to keep going and learn fast.
Did you get discouraged though when you shut your first company down? And I don't know, like, to me, I don't view anything as necessarily a failure, especially if you learn from it, and you clearly did, and like you guys obviously did well, but do you view it as kind of like, do you attach your identity to it? And is it like, oh, like now that first business shut down, like, am I capable of another one? Or no, you kind of just went right into the next thing?
It's a good question. I don't think that happened to me.
Okay.
I don't necessarily know why, but
that's good.
I guess that's good. But I guess I could see people, I guess I could see why it can happen to someone. I mean, for me, like, I'm just so focused on building something of value that I guess now I'm thinking about it, like, I don't think I had time to think.
You
like,
overlapped. You just went right to the next
one. To
one.
think like, oh, I mean, this is not, I'm like a failure, or like, I don't know how to build a business. Like, I don't think I took the time to think that for myself.
That's good because I mean, I know for me, like I am someone that I wrap my identity in like what I'm doing. And so I always get scared that like if something doesn't work out, like I feel like I'm going to go through like an identity crisis with it afterwards, just because it's so wrapped up in like me. Like I can't disassociate. It's not like, oh, me personally, and then this is just my business. Like my business and me are very intertwined. Do you feel that way with any of the businesses you've started?
I do. I mean, and mostly I think it's around pride, like the feeling of pride of like, hey, you know, I thought about these and we are creating these as a team. But there's a lot of pride in what you're building with your team. So I think it's more around that. And but you know, at the end of the day, if it doesn't work out, like how much do you learn from that thing? Like you know, whatever you were doing, how much that you actually got to learn about that thing. It's just it's impressive how much you get to understand how things work or not work when trying something like a company, even if it fails, right? It's a massive success.
Right. So you started working on ButcherBox with the founders and was there anyone else? Was it founders and like two other people or?
So, you know, main CEO, Mike Salguero, this is the guy that I reached out to via, you know, cold email and trying to get to learn from him. I indeed ended up learning a lot from him. You know, I think he's a great leader. And when I joined, there was two more people. One of them focused on operations. One of them focused on marketing. Mike and Eric, their names. And then when I first joined, it was all about how are we selling a box of meat in the mail.
Yeah.
You know, like the marketing side of it, but not necessarily yet. How are we building a ButcherBox brand? But like, how are we like in our messaging and who we're working with? How do we get them to help us explain to people they can go online and buy a box of meat in the mail? Because
that was weird at the time. Totally. I mean, nowadays there's so many like food delivery services, but... So
are you calling me weird?
No. At the time, I feel like it was so unheard of to do something like that, where how do you convince people that that's a healthier alternative or that it's better to pay higher, because I mean, it was more expensive than going to your grocery store and buying steak, right?
Depends.
Okay.
If you were looking for the exact same quality that we were doing and claims on the meat, we are or I shouldn't say we anymore, ButcherBox is a better price alternative for it. But the problem with it is that it's very hard to compare, because usually when you go to a retail store and you grab a piece of meat, you don't know what you're buying.
Like at Publix, you're not going to get the same quality.
Yeah, and you know, you could see a beautiful label that has like grass painted on it, and it says, hey, this is a grass-fed meat, and then on the edge it says grain finished, which is like, okay. You know, like there's a lot of stuff like that goes, that happens in the meat industry. So it's very hard to compare like the actual claims of the meat that you're buying. But I think that when it's one-to-one, the exact same product, ButcherBox ends up being a better price alternative. But still, though, like even if the price was better, you're right. It was weird to buy frozen meat in the mail.
Yeah.
You know, you're completely right. And now consumer behavior has changed. Now it's like
normal.
It's normal.
I buy anything in the mail.
Anything. People just know that they can buy something frozen or refrigerated, and it can get delivered to your house. It's like a full consumer behavior and learning curve that has happened already, which I think it's you know, amazing for the industry and the consumer market in general. But the way that we were bridging that gap is we would go to specific audiences, let's say the paleo diet audience, and we would find, hey, who's the top 5 most influential people in this space that praise grass-fed beef and that people listen and hear when they say something or when they give out a recommendation. So we would go out to these people and we would basically broker affiliate deals with them where they would end up making a lot of money when they perform and sell butcher boxes. But for us, because we were a bootstrap company, you know, we had zero money in the bank. We were not paying upfront for these promotions.
Yeah.
But I think just because we were going to the right people, that they actually had a very engaged audience and they knew how to sell the product, they ended up making a lot more money than if we would have, you know, paid upfront for that.
Yeah.
So I think that whole dynamic was interesting, but that was what we used to bridge the gap. Just basically finding people that are a trusted voice in the space and working with them.
So like influencers, like YouTuber, what is it? YouTube? Was it blogs?
I think, a lot of it, but what was most successful at the time was email lists.
Really? Like
Yeah.
newsletters?
Yeah.
Wow.
Which is, I'm talking, 7 years ago. It's not
Yeah.
as successful anymore right now because I don't think people are, reading their emails from someone else who's like, not actually a one-to-one email that closely anymore. But what worked for us super well was email lists.
Wow.
Like the one question that we would ask someone that we were going to work with was, how big is your email list?
Wow. Okay. So I guess nowadays it's kind of like how many followers you have or what's your engagement.
Yeah. And it was like, how big is your email list?
Okay. And so was that your role to find these people
Yes,
and to talk
work
to
with
them and
super close.
okay.
So for me, I loved it because it's a combination of sales and marketing, which I think it's two different things. The sales part is, how can I make a partnership with someone, and how can I negotiate a deal that I know is going to be a win-win for them, and how can I get them to understand that they're going to make a lot of money with this if they know how to sell it, and how can I help them sell it? And then the marketing side is, okay, how can I explain the ButcherBox product better? How can I get content for this? How can I, help them sell it once we broker a deal, make a partnership on this? So that was basically my first role at ButcherBox is, pure growth.
And did you just get thrown into that, or was that something you wanted to do? Was it something that you had done in the past at maybe your previous company, or it was just kind of like, hey, we need sales and we need marketing?
It was mostly, how are we figuring this out as a team? And I think that creates, usually when that's the approach at companies, people end up like fitting into where they add the most value versus maybe working on something that they don't necessarily are great at or know how to do best. And that's why, and this is somewhat of another topic, but that's why I don't like to structure early teams at companies like too strict or like too structured, or like give out like extremely specific titles or like responsibilities, because you don't really know what people are great at until you start working with them. So that gives you the flexibility, and that gives people the flexibility to them naturally start fitting into the roles.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that titles are kind of arbitrary in the beginning. Besides, I think CEO is probably
you have to be
necessary. But after that, I think it's very just like, okay, you are technical, like you can, that's your role. And so that's like what you'll be working on is developing the product. And then, okay, I'm good at marketing, so I'm going to start doing that. But it's not like you have a designated title in the beginning, because like you said, things can change. But I do think you need to have complementary skill sets as a founding team, or else you can kind of step on toes.
But like even a CEO though, you can't really like fully assume a CEO role of like, oh, I'm the CEO of this company, so I just make like, high level decisions or whatever it is. Because even the CEO, you need to understand early on, like, okay, what's really my role in this company? And it, there's a week that you might need to act as, the best salesperson, but then the next week you need to act as the best operations person. Yeah. And then after that, you need to do, marketing HR work and marketing, like, which I guess could be resumed as the role of the CEO of an early stage company. But even the title of the CEO early stage, you shouldn't be taking it too seriously, I think.
Totally agree. And I think as a startup though, you're wearing so many hats. Like you're just doing anything you need to do. I think at that point it's like you obviously have your role, but like everyone is doing anything at that point because you don't have a big team. It's like stuff needs to get done and it needs to get done. So someone has to do it. I feel like that's like what the startup world is like today.
And that's also how you get, I think, team members that, are committed to the mission of the company when they step out of their regular comfort zone or their day-to-day job or responsibilities because they see an opportunity or they see something that needs to be tackled inside the company. Like that's the type of culture that you want to create. And for doing that, I think that you need to be flexible with, job responsibilities to start with, and just, not be too strict with the whole titles thing, which I think it actually ends up being better for everyone, because with time and with growing the company, people start fitting into what their best role is to grow exponentially with the company versus locking someone in a box of like, hey, you are, head of these or director of these or manager of this. I think that might seem like beneficial for the team members or employees early on, but I think it could end up hurting them in the long run.
I totally agree. And so when you were working, you were starting with the marketing/sales, let's say, and like messaging and bringing people on. How quickly did you see success though? Like you guys started selling, you started working with people that have big email lists and, getting these deals, and then they started promoting it. How long was that timeline of working with, let's say, an influencer and then seeing direct sales from them and continuing the process with them?
So for ButcherBox, it was relatively quick. But, we were working like 16-hour days, like in the office and just like cranking work.
How did you do school?
Good question. So my last semester, I ended up putting all my classes on Fridays.
Really? You were able to do that though?
And then still like I would go like 2 Fridays a month and just basically complete whatever I have to complete for that day. I still had a good GPA though, I have to say. And
to set the record straight.
To set the record straight, yeah. Just in case Bentley is listening to this. But we did see early success with the marketing strategy and sales strategy that we were doing. And I think that was another lesson for us, where when you see success in something, double down.
Yeah.
On that.
That's like what we're going through right now. We're focusing a lot on user acquisition and marketing, and the product's at a really good spot. So we're really focused on marketing. Like we're putting more efforts now than we did a few months ago. And we're just testing out a bunch of channels and seeing what works, and like you said, doubling down on what's working for us.
Totally. And like, that creates more work.
Yeah.
Right. That's like so much work, because you have to now, okay, this is working. You have to double down on this. But when I say it was a quick success, it doesn't mean that like we reached out to someone and that one person promoted us and then we saw a $10 million bump in revenue. Like, we were reaching out to hundreds of people by the day.
Wow.
And just, reaching out to people by the day. And then we would have stats like, okay, if we reach out to 100 people, 10 are going to get back to us, and then 5 are going to be a maybe, and then 1 is going to be a yes. And then we had the stats to how many people we had to reach out on a daily basis to then get to a specific number of revenue. And then we also knew that about 1 to 2% of the people from the email lists were going to convert into customers. So we could almost like predict how many sales we were going to have based on how many email list subscribers that person we were working with had.
Yeah,
so
you got it down to like a science.
Yeah, so there was like a science behind this, and there was a lot of work. But, once we got that down, because we saw early on that, we work with a couple influencers or affiliates that were doing a good job, that, hey, we just have to double down on this.
And you guys did, because ButcherBox is everywhere. Like advertisement wise, like every YouTuber I watch, every podcast, it's like you see a sponsor from them. And so you were working there throughout college. You graduated college. Were you still at ButcherBox at that point?
Yes, yeah, totally.
When did you leave, or what was because you started, now you're at you started another company. So
Correct.
What was that transition like, and why did you jump to start something else?
So before that, my last role at ButcherBox was head of logistics. Okay. So basically put together the logistics department from scratch with a great team. We hired some great people for that team that are still running the team nowadays, which is, amazing to see what they've built. And that happened because when we started scaling, we now had to ship all these thousands of boxes that we were selling. And logistics and operations became our biggest nightmare and basically the biggest trouble for our margin. Bootstrap company, so we had to make money on box one. We could not sell a box on box one that we were not making money on. That was like that simple. So we started seeing some areas of opportunities in logistics, and I started asking some questions that I thought were coming naturally to me. But when I look back into it, it was what you were saying before, which is I learned these from my prior company.
Yeah.
But I basically started asking questions like, hey, why do we have one box size? Like we were shipping always everything on a 15 square box.
Okay.
We had orders that actually could have gone out on a 10 or 12 square box, but then we had orders that could have gone out on a 20 square box. So, seems like a relatively simple concept, but if you're not thinking about it and you don't have a system that decides what box you're using and optimizing for it, you're just like losing so much money on it. And then, operational and shipping costs, we were like 50x in the company and our shipping costs were going up. It's like, wait, we should be getting economies of scale of some sort by doing this. So I started asking all these questions, and then Mike, the CEO, at some point showed up to my desk and he's like, "Hey, dude, do you seem to know something about this? Like, I don't know where it's coming from, but you know something about it." And he gave me a massive stack of papers, like put them on my desk, and he's like, "Hey, here's every single agreement that we've signed in logistics and operations. Here's every single bill. Here's what we're doing with this. Like, help me figure it out."
Yeah.
And that's basically when I took over the logistics department, and then I ran it for the last 5 years at ButcherBox. And then that's where Grip came from.
Yeah.
Which is, hey, why are we spending millions of dollars as a company to build this logistics arm? Like, that's not what we do. Like, why are we spending
You're not
all
a
this money?
logistics company.
We're not. We're a meat brand that sources an amazing product, that works with amazing suppliers, that created an iconic brand that you now see everywhere and has like a beautiful front end, point of sale website. But logistics arm, whole other game, whole other company.
Right.
So my question that I kept asking myself is, why are we spending all this money doing this when we should just be plugging into something? Now I look at it as Stripe, for example.
I was about to say, it's like Stripe,
totally.
but
Same.
logistics, yeah.
So if you're using your engineers to try to rebuild Stripe internally, what are you even doing?
Yeah, that's why Stripe exists.
Yeah, totally. And that's why you can trust a company like Stripe to be the best at that, because that's the only thing that they do.
Right.
So yes, you have to pay them money, and that that's a cost that you have to incur. But when you look at it in the overall perspective, like, it's making you scale much faster, save money, process credit card, have your data, compliance perfectly aligned. So I thought about it that way. Of like, why is there not a company that is just focused on helping perishable direct-to-consumer brands with their logistics, fulfillment, and data, and basically decision-making on how to ship a box?
So you specifically focus on perishable goods?
Yes.
Do you think you'll ever expand and do non-perishable goods too? Or are there already
not
companies
right now
for that?
Not right now. I mean, we're like so focused on what we're doing, and we're scaling pretty fast, and the team is growing pretty fast, that like it's working the way that we're building the company and the product that we put together. So we're like fully focused on this right now.
How long ago did you start that?
We officially incorporated the company 2 years ago.
Okay.
But we launched the first product about 18 months ago.
Okay. And so you left ButcherBox to pursue Grip.
Correct.
And do you have co-founders? How did you meet them?
So our co-founder, Jimmy Cooper, CTO of the company right now, he used to be head of data at ButcherBox.
Okay.
So he comes from the problem the same way I do. So he's been amazing in helping us figure out what's the intersection of logistics, technology, and software and data, to the point where, like, we always ask ourselves, what did we wish we had when we were getting started at ButcherBox, and what can either steal at that scale? What piece of software or service or technology can help a company steal at that scale? Because if we can work with a ButcherBox sized company, then that means that, a company that could be doing 50, 30, or, $10 million in revenue, we could be like so much help for, because we're basically leveling the playing field and democratizing the full access to logistics and perishable shipping.
Yeah, that's great. And was that, I know you had the problem, but when you started building it, was it a lot harder than you thought to build? Or because you were already doing logistics at ButcherBox, you kind of, was it easier to do? Or what was your mindset going into it, and how difficult was it actually getting it started?
I would say that we have an unfair advantage.
I mean, it's always best to come from the problem.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I'm I know it. I'm serious about it. We have an unfair advantage. We both were one of the pioneers, in the industry, in the market. We basically helped scale one of the biggest successes for direct to consumer perishable brands that's out there. So that's an unfair advantage for us as entrepreneurs in the space, but it is such a benefit for our customers. Because the reason why I think that these have not been built before us, it's because the industry or the market segment is too new
Yeah.
to have people that come from the problem had the opportunity to like build these companies. Like there has not been enough time from when the market basically exploded in growth and like reached a significant scale to now being able to put these services and programs for other customers.
Is that why you decided to take the leap and do it?
Part of it.
Because you didn't want to miss out on this advantage that you had?
Yeah, part of it for sure. And I was also asking myself the question of like, if I'm not the one who's going to solve this problem, who's going to solve it?
Yeah, because you needed it to be solved.
Yeah, totally. And I was thinking about it as like, hey, you really need to come from the problem. Like,
Yeah.
I strongly believe that you need to come from the problem because it's a very specific niche problem that has a lot of variables and intricacies that you need to solve. So, I mean, not to say that like there's not other people that could potentially solve the problem. Yes,
Yeah.
for sure. But, you know, I think I have and Jimmy has an unfair advantage, you know, in terms of coming from the problem.
Yeah, I think that's so cool. And it's really, I mean, you have a very like, your track record shows a lot of perseverance, a lot of success. So I have no doubt that this is going to do super, super well. I mean, you guys already have a bunch of customers, right? Since you've launched 18 months ago?
It's been a good business so far. We I think that we are probably the fastest growing company in the space.
That's awesome.
I venture to say a lot of work. Like the commitment that you see from the team working right now is like unbelievable. It's amazing. Like so much accountability and so much work to like and passion to solve the problem that I'm very proud to see with the team. And you know, we can't really be doing this without the team that we put together for this. So
How big is the team?
So we're like 20 plus people right now.
And did you raise money for this, or is this bootstrapped?
We raised a couple $1 million
Okay.
to start with, but it was mostly people from the industry.
Okay.
Like we basically asked a question of like, hey, who can help us
Yeah.
build this company faster and better and bigger and more sophisticated?
Great. That's super cool. And what is do you think that like whenever this sells, goes public, whatever your plans are for this company, that you'll just start something else right away? Or do you think you'll ever like slow down and I don't want to say retire, but
I don't think I believe in slowing down necessarily or like not being active of some sort. I think rest is important.
yeah.
You know, taking time to think and acknowledge where you come from and acknowledge what else is in front of you and like what have you learned to this point, and just, you know, take time to rest. I think that's extremely important. But I don't necessarily believe in taking, you know, like a few months to
Do nothing.
because the working capability, work ethic, and your brain, this is all like muscle type of you know, of things. So, you know, if you stop working out and then you try to do your biceps again, like, you know, it's gonna hurt after the day after, and then you're gonna probably lose so much you know, power with whatever you're doing. So for that reason, I don't see a moment in the near or midterm future where I would say, okay, I'm like slowing down.
Yeah, I think that's good though. I always like, I don't ever envision myself like full on retiring. Like it's like you said, I think you can like switch and do other things, but you should always have a work ethic or have, you know, be working hard at something. It just might look differently.
Yep.
And then before we go, what advice would you give an entrepreneur today that maybe they're in college, like you were at, you know, in Boston, and they want to start a company or they want to learn from someone or they want to be an entrepreneur? Like, what would your first piece of advice be to them?
Work hard.
Yeah.
Similar to what we were saying before of like the overnight success misconception, you know, that has made people think, unfortunately, that you don't necessarily need to work hard to be very successful. And I don't think that's the case. I think you need to bust your ass and work hard and say yes to work, because a lot of people, I think, have become very entitled to say no to work early on in their career, but you don't know what yes is going to be your winning lottery ticket. So you have to say yes and do the work and do it like as hard and passionate and like with a success mindset, like as much as you can.
And I always think that, I mean, I love that. I totally agree. And also, everything leads to something else. Like whatever you're doing right now doesn't mean you're stuck doing it forever. Like your story, you've had so many transitions and they've all kind of led into the other. Without one, you probably wouldn't have done the other. So I always think like, say yes, like you said, you can always pivot, you can always do something else, but you learn so much from every experience that you have. And you never want to be the person that's like, thinks that they're above something or thinks that they can't learn from something, because I think you can learn from any like work experience that you have.
Yeah, totally. And when you get older and when you get more experience and when you've had, you know, a few companies under your belt, I think you can start to say no to some things, because now you learn what you can say no to. But when you're starting out, like you don't know what you should be saying no to. So I think you're much better off saying yes to the different experiences that you can have, so that you can learn from them, understand what you like to do, what are you good at, and then just, you know, focusing on that.
Yep. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Where can they find you, your company, if they want to work with you guys? Like plug anything you want.
They can look for the company, I think LinkedIn, just Grip or Grip Shipping. Then my LinkedIn, Juan Camilo Meisel, I think it's how I'm in there. And then I've actually started posting a little bit more on Twitter for the last couple weeks. I opened it in 2011 and I think I went on it like twice.
Yeah.
And never went on it again until like a month ago.
Okay.
But I've been encouraged to, you know, say more, to stay more active and to, you know, use it also to learn from other people, because I, you know, like the learning experience a lot. So company, gripshipping.com. It's the website. LinkedIn, just Grip or Grip Shipping, you'll find us. And then my Twitter, you know, Juan Camilo Meisel.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.